Welcome you all for this session of Umang. At the outset, I wish to thank Team Umang for giving me this opportunity to host this event today evening. And I feel privileged to have amongst us an eminent speaker and a versatile personality, Dr. Vasudevan sir. Santa has probably brought us the good luck in Dr. Vasudevan on this holy day of Christmas. Dear friends, Umang is a brainchild of Dr. Gauri Saroj, and with her initiative and perseverance and valuable contributions from other like-minded passionate doctors from Team Umang, we have conducted 10 variety of sessions in last 1 year, touching every aspect of life, from nurturing oneself to mental health, to stress, to man management, to counseling, to financial planning, and to good nutrition, to stability for doctors. And this is our last session of this year, and we wish to continue, place to continue this next many years. You know, we all go through some form of stress, strain, upset throughout our lives, but many a times it becomes difficult for us to cope up with it and lead to various mental health issues amongst us. Umang desire and aim at helping such colleagues and friends in preventing, accepting, sharing, and taking action and finding solutions for themselves. And together, by expressing, appreciating, rejuvenating themselves. Umang wished to create a platform for the doctors, by the doctors, through the doctors, with the ultimate aim of creating awareness amongst us, empowering ourselves, make ourselves feel joyous and radiant, and making mental health as a part of curriculum for graduation as well as post-graduation. Coming to today's topic, when your passion flowers into compassion. Compassion, it simply means, that is what we understand, sympathy. But actually, there is a difference between sympathy and compassion. In that, sympathy responds to suffering with sorrow and concern, while compassion responds with warmth and care. An act of compassion is defined by its helpfulness, patience and wisdom, kindness and perseverance, warmth and resolve are the qualities of compassion. And this is what I have learned, assimilated, and imbibed on myself for my 21 years of passionate critical care practice, seeing life and death so closely, experiencing griefs and sorrows and the happiness at the same moment. When one patient is getting well, that gives you happiness, and the other bed, a young patient is dying. The pains that the patient, the relatives, or anyone go through, that one has to see oneself in other shoes to completely understand and feel. Not only to show, but deliver compassion and compassionate care. And the delivery has to start from oneself, as quoted by the great Lord Buddha, that you need to be compassionate to yourself first, then only you can be compassionate to others. But how much is good enough or excess? Should it be too compassionate? Are you not human being? Do you go into compassionate fate? To know and understand the true value of it, let's hear from Dr. Vasudevan sir. Dr. Vasudevan sir is the professor and head of Department of Neurology, Savitha Medical College, Chennai. He is a senior consultant neurologist at the Brain, Spine and Nerve Center, Chennai. He has numerous publications in national and international journals and has been an examiner for DM neurology in various universities. He is a PhD guide. He is the editor and author of Practice Pearls in Neurology, Management Pearls in Neurology, section editor and author in the Iron Textbook of Neurology. He has conducted numerous workshops in clinical electrophysiology. He has been principal investigator for clinical trials in epilepsy, stroke, peripheral neuropathy, Parkinson's disease, and spinal cord diseases. Founder of Beyond Brain, Colloquia for Study of Consciousness. He has been a life member of various academic institutions.
Ravi, you're on mute.
Ravi, you got muted by mistake. Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for those very kind words of introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. Good. At the outset, let me thank Dr. Gauri Saroj and all the members of Umang for inviting me to this special event and asking me to speak here. I feel privileged to be part of this function, and I feel the goals set by you for Umang as a movement are very relevant today, very appropriate, and as a matter of fact, they entirely match with with what one would expect to be delivered as compassionate care today. And what happens to, in talking about compassion, compassionate care, we should not forget, what happens to the doctors themselves, like Dr. Ravi correctly pointed out. And we need to look after ourselves also. So I thank you once again for inviting me here. And it is easy to say compassion, and it's easy to say use words which are synonyms, but it's an extremely vast and very nebulous area. The other words which come to mind are, when you talk of compassion, it is nebulous, it is abstract, it is gray, it is ill-defined, and yet some people might even say in the scientific field, when you come to the scientific field, where medicine is included, some people might even think that it is unimportant, probably not of great consequence. But of late, a lot of there are a lot of revelations which show that it is extremely important. And I ventured into this field, by trying to conduct a survey during this period of the pandemic, in which I was especially trying to look at what happens to the doctors when they are under so much of stress, and what happens to their attitude, what happens to their behavior, and so on. And I shall be talking a little bit about what we found in the. I must thank all of you also, and all the members who participated, and doctors who participated in the survey. I take this opportunity to thank them as well, because without them, no information would be available. At the end of my talk, I leave you to decide whether it has been really useful. There is a saying, "Fools rush in where angels fear to tread." I don't know. I'll leave you to judge whether I'm among the former or the latter. Anyway, so when we talk of, let me start sharing my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah. So what is compassion? If you look at it, the entire literature, the history is strewn with examples. There are so many quotes which we like to use every day when we talk of compassion. There are very famous quotations as well, like I have mentioned some of them here. And Dr. Ravi was talking about Buddha's sayings on that, which is very true. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to understand that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. This was by Martin Luther King. And Mother Teresa said, "I would rather make mistakes in kindness and compassion than work miracles in unkindness and hardness." And she needs no introduction. And as the Gautam Buddha said, "In whom there is no sympathy for living beings, know him as an outcast." And of course, our own old Sanskrit saying, "Jiveshu karuna chapi maitri teshu vidiyata," which means show friendliness and compassion to all living beings. So there is no dearth of literature on this subject. Everybody knows about it, and everybody talks about it as well. So then what do we mean by compassion? What is the meaning actually? If you look at the dictionary, because we like to define things, and especially doctors like definitions. So let me put up two definitions here, which may make things a bit clearer, for people. Dr. Ravi was mentioning sympathy and compassion. And he rightly pointed out that they are not the same. Indeed, they are not the same. Empathy refers to the cognitive and the other emotional processes in which the perspective of the other is taken. So that means a person is able to look or feel for, or actually feel the other person's pain or sorrow or emotions. So that is empathy. Now, compassion includes empathy, but it goes further in that the person who feels empathy also desires to help and alleviate the suffering of the person who has a problem without expectations of any reward or anything in return. So that is the crux of the issue here. So that is compassion. So there are a lot of synonyms. Karuna. Why I am putting this up, I will tell you. Karuna, Daya, Anukampa. Now, Anukampa is one of the earliest words in Sanskrit. And probably I was speaking to a Sanskrit expert, and he said the compassion could probably have come from the root Anukampa. So it's possible. And then the old other Hebrew language, Racham, Chamal, and in Greek, they call it Eusplanchnia. And of course, compassion itself is derived from compassio or commiseratio, which is from Latin. So these are all the old languages, and this term and the feeling and the emotion or what have you was well recognized and existed has been existing since thousands of years. And what are the connotations in which we talk about compassion or empathy? So it may be life in general. So you can take practical issues where one may be compassionate or helpful to a neighbor or a stranger or a person whom you don't even know. A person who is on the road, who's lost his purse, maybe you give him, you help him out, you maybe drop him somewhere. That may be an act of compassion. You can talk of compassion in a philosophical sense, in which you define it, you find out what it is, how it works in society, and what are the ramifications of being compassionate or non-compassionate. So that is a philosophical standpoint. And of course, there is the spiritual standpoint, which overrides almost all the other outlooks. And the spiritual compassion is very different from the other connotations of compassion, in that it is completely selfless, and it has no expectations. So it is so that is the spiritual outlook or spiritual definition of compassion. In fact, compassion is supposed to be, or is expected to be, the basic foundation for any spiritual aspiration or any spiritual process or even progress. And of course, now we come to the main part, that is the medical aspect of connotation. Now, in medicine, as we see so many people who are suffering, who have diseases, the expression of this compassion towards such people is expected to be natural. It is that it is not surprising that one is compassionate to a person who is suffering. So, that is given. But then one should also be compassionate to oneself. Now, that has not been recognized for a long time. And of late, more people have started recognizing this, especially in our field. And we will talk about it a bit later. So if you look at the medical aspects of compassion, how you deal with patients, how you show kindness to them, or how you talk to them. You may be an excellent physician, or you may be an excellent surgeon. You may be at the top in terms of your publications, in your research, in your cutting edge knowledge. But if you don't talk to the patient, or if you don't say a kind word or two, however good you are, the patient may not have a good opinion about you. So if you look at the history of medical aspects of compassion, References to compassionate and kind medical practice date back to Charaka and Sushrut. These are very, very clear. These predate other cultures like the Greco-Roman, so by thousands of years. And clear guidelines were laid down in Charak Samhita regarding physician behavior, and these have a distinct spiritual undercurrent. So it's all there in the sutras of Charak Samhita and even Sushrut Samhita. And Sushrut Samhita deals more with the surgical aspects of treatment, and even there they have mentioned how a person who aspires to be a physician, who is actually a physician or a doctor, should behave. This is very famous, Chatushpada, or the 4 pillars which are mentioned in the Charak Samhita. I will show it to you later. Other Eastern medicine traditions like shamanic medicine also emphasize kindness in practice. So this is not new, and this is not something which we have discovered of late, of which we are talking about. Especially in the Eastern traditions, in our own Indian tradition, this is very well recognized. In fact, it is a pity that it was, so to say, in the curriculum earlier on, in the days of Charaka and Sushruta, in their books, in their texts, in their samhitas, these were clearly mentioned as to the behavioral aspect, as to how a physician should conduct himself. This is a shloka from one of those, from the Samhita, which I will just paraphrase it. We won't go into all the details. He who has learnt all sciences from the Guru, having nectar-like hands, that is a healing touch, skilled in his job or activities, devoid of desire, who is courageous and compassionate, pure and righteous doctor. Doctor should be of this nature. So this is very clear as to the definition, and the word Kripalu is forms an important part. That is, a compassion, or being compassionate, righteous, is very clearly defined in this sutra. So when there is so much of literature, when there is so much of tradition about compassion in medicine all around the world, why are we talking about it now? What is the need to talk about it? So of late, people have started looking at the neurobiology also. As typically we tend to do, we like to put things in boxes and find out what they are, especially neurology. In neurology now we have got so many things, the God spot and the God gene, the God helmet. We tend to put things in certain areas of the brain and say that this area of the brain is responsible for this and that area of the brain is responsible for that. And similarly, people have looked at compassion and empathy. And, interestingly, they do not arise from the same areas. For example, as you see here, compassion in these fMRI studies, which was associated with the medial orbitofrontal cortex, as I can show you here in the green part, as you can see in the cursor, the first frame, the pregenual anterior cingulate cortex, here, this portion here in the red, and the ventral striatum. This red part is the striatum, that is part of the basal ganglia. So these areas are associated with compassion or compassionate behavior. And empathy, in contrast, is associated with the anterior part of the insula, which is a deep layer of the cortex, and the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So much for the neurobiology. I won't go into great details here because that is not the thrust or the focus of our talk. Why I put this up was, for the reason that this particular emotion or this particular way of thinking, or whatever you want to call it, is hardwired into our brains. So compassion is part of human behavior. It is not as if you have to learn it. It is already there. It is not as if you have to acquire it. It is like speech, or is it like any other, say for example, emotion which a person may express. It is already there in our brains. And these are the 6 components. Again, I put this up because Western medicine likes to compartmentalize these things and put them into various categories: components, empathy, sympathy, sensitivity, tolerance, motivation, non-judgment. I would also, most important thing which I put this up here just to show you that one important thing is missing, that is care or a caring attitude that is missing here. Nevertheless, it is useful for us to know these things because as scientists or as researchers, when you look at these things and when you are doing some, say for example, a survey or a research, it helps to know what are the components and based on which we can frame a survey or questions, based on which we can score, and therefore we can get some idea, because this is an abstract idea. All emotions are abstract. Behavior, emotions, these are more abstract than we can actually imagine. And it is very difficult to quantify this. For example, pain. If you take pain, pain is totally subjective. As a neurological sign or a symptom, it is very difficult for us to assess pain. We only show them these faces and ask them, where is it from 1 to 10? Is it 1 or is it 10? So we entirely depend on what the person says as to the level or the severity of pain. Similarly, when you look at things like compassion or say, for example, description of beauty or kindness or any such thing, these are totally abstract. These are non-quantifiable. Therefore, when you see something like this, components, it is slightly easier for us to grasp and makes it easy for us to probably look into it in greater detail. So that is the only reason why this is really useful. So as I said, we know about the components, we know about the hardwiring, we know about the history, we know about the tradition, and the media is replete with incidents of how people have been helpful and compassionate to total strangers in which they didn't expect anything in return. Sometimes they've even risked their lives. Not only that, surprisingly, there are reports of even primates and even lower mammals like dogs, for example, which have been extremely courageous in helping in rescuing people. Of course, they don't expect anything in return. So obviously, there are traits of kindness or helpfulness, if you might say. They won't know. Probably the lower mammals would not know what is kindness or compassion. They won't put it into words like we do. But helpfulness, yes, certainly is hardwired into all of our brains. And yet, here we are today talking about it in great detail. So why are we doing it, especially in relation to medicine? Why? Because as we see today, compassion or the role of compassion is conspicuous by its absence in medical curriculum. It is totally missing. And there is a distinct perception that the human element is lacking in treatment or even in the interactions between the medical people and the patients who come to them. Medical practice has morphed somewhat into what is now called the healthcare industry. And therefore, the pressure to perform and focus on tasks, individual specialities, rather than caring for the patient as a whole, has become more important. And there is an increasing use and dependence on technology. For example, if I see an MRI with white spots, there will be definitely a tendency to think of demyelination or some vascular lesion, rather than looking at the patient and trying to find out whether it is really relevant to the patient. And we know now, I'm just giving you MRI as an example because I'm a neurologist. There are obviously many other examples which you people would know. These have been now labeled as UBOs or unidentified bright spots, which can be completely innocuous in a young person, which may be meaningless, or it might just be associated with an innocuous or a benign condition like migraine, for example, or, depending on the situation, it might mean something else. But blindly depending on technology and doing more and more investigations, not looking into the clinical aspects, also forms part of non-compassionate or a non-caring outlook, one might say. And this in turn affects the doctor, no less. Not only the patient, definitely affects the doctor. So increasing burden, increasing workload, increasing pressure leads to fatigue and burnout. And this in turn causes a lot of irritability, anger, resentment, and errors in judgment at the workplace, which can cause a lot of problems. And this in turn leads to, this becomes a downward spiral and fear of litigation, actual litigations, and treating patients as numbers. So many patients we saw today, 40 patients, 50 patients. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, Patients are converted into numbers. I mean, we can't, you have to face the elephant in the room. It is there. You cannot avoid it. So the more numbers you see, the better, the greater doctor you are, as far as the corporates are concerned. So these are things which have probably along the line made us miss out on compassionate practice. One is reminded of the jolly old family physician, who used to carry a bag and go from one home to another. Even I have seen some of them who used to visit my home when I was a youngster. And not only that, they used to bring a lot of care and warmth when they used to visit home and give a lot of hope and encouragement to the patients. Even their very presence for a few minutes would make a lot of difference to the patient. So that is sadly missing nowadays. So these are all not my own words. I have not made it up. These are, these are points which I have derived from the modern perspectives. And from where have these perspectives come? They have come from various surveys and polls. And these are two. 78% of physicians said medicine is either no longer rewarding or less rewarding. And 60% of doctors would not recommend medicine as a career to young people. So this is from the Physicians Foundation 2008 survey of 12,000 US physicians. And another of nurses, student nurses graduate with high ideals of compassionate, whole person care. But within 2 years of starting practice, most are compromised idealists or crushed idealists. That is, they become very disappointed or probably disillusioned with the system, and even worse, with the system is okay, but when they become disillusioned with themselves, it causes a lot of problems. So this is from another 2007 survey. And some polls, opinion polls, 84% of patients and 81% of doctors definitely believe that compassionate care makes a difference in how well patients recover from an illness. 81% of patients and 71% of doctors believe compassionate care can make a difference in whether a patient actually lives or dies. Only 53% of patients, however, and 58, this is as far as the US goes. We don't have any such data for our country, unfortunately. And 58% of doctors believe the US healthcare system is a compassionate one. So there is a huge gap in the expectation and delivery. And 67% of patients and 55% of doctors are concerned that current changes in the US healthcare system will make it more difficult to provide compassion or compassionate care. So we are, unfortunately, in our country, progressing in the same direction. As far as healthcare is concerned, it has become an industry. We have to face it. It has become an industry. And once it becomes like that, the individual is compromised and the collective becomes more important. And once we are in the collective, every person becomes faceless. There is a number or there is an identity, of course, but it becomes a faceless task. That is, you have dealt with one patient. Here is the patient with, say, for example, MS. I spend 10 minutes on that patient with MS, explain the things to be done and send them away. And then the next patient I see might be a migraine. There is a vast difference between a multiple sclerosis patient and a patient with migraine. Of course, both deserve compassion, both deserve time. But probably, as everybody knows, a multiple sclerosis patient's prognosis is far worse than a patient with migraine. But when you are working inside a system in which you have to see so many numbers per day and we have to deal with so many other things, we may have to compromise on such ideals, and which is actually happening. So again, these are words of the media, not mine. Healthcare is in pain all around the world, and healthcare is dehumanized, which is, of course, quite right. I agree with it. Now, when so much is said and done, what are we actually doing? Now, there are studies which have been done. There have been not too many. There are studies from the US, from Australia, from New Zealand, not even Australia, New Zealand, from Europe, and one or two studies from our country long ago, and one from Pakistan, which I could identify, and one or two others, I don't know, Europe, yeah. So these studies have focused on what is happening to physicians and how they interact with patients. I'll just show you a few examples here. But as you can see here, the underlining is mine. I wanted to focus on the title, Addressing Physician Quality of Life, Understanding the Relationship Between Burnout, Work Engagement, Compassion, Fatigue, and Satisfaction. This is from Singapore. And there is another one side by side: prevalence, causes, and consequences of compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue in emergency care, a mixed method study of UK NHS consultants. So as you can, the first one from Singapore looked at intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors in physicians, and they decided that when there are manipulations of intrinsic factors, that is factors which are intrinsic to the person, his or her personality, outlook, attitude, and so on, it can make a difference. And the other study found that there are a lot of extrinsic factors like workload, pressure of work, time given to each patient, whether they are on rotating duties or not, especially because this was addressed towards emergency care and acute care. That study, they found a few things there, which I'll show you. So, but what they found here was that once you address the intrinsic factors are probably more important, and once the attitudinal changes occur, you might cause less burnout. Surprisingly, the Singapore study showed a very high percentage of burnout and compassion fatigue. That is 37% burnout, which is very high, and 7.5% compassion fatigue. That is total of about 44% of doctors were compromised themselves. So their own career, their own outlook was compromised. And that, in my opinion, is a very big number. And this other UK study also found, but their findings were a bit more optimistic, in the sense that they didn't find so much of compassion fatigue. Many doctors were satisfied with their work, but they complained of irritability, increased workload, too much of pressure, lack of support, and lack of facilities for proper work. They felt that if the work was shared, they could probably spend more time and be more compassionate towards patient. Probably they would not themselves, be so much stressed out and feel tired at the end of the day and not being able to do anything else. So this is what these two studies said. And there are quite a few other similar studies, like I said. But the problem is, almost all of them, instead of focusing on the core issue of compassion, they have focused on compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue, as you can see that I have underlined there, which is not a very right thing to do, as I will show you. Now we come to my own survey, which many of you have participated in. And this shows the basic demographics, that is the gender distribution, the specialty versus general. Now these are also relevant, as I will tell you, and whether they are specialists or non-specialists, and the number of years of practice. Now, if you go back to the previous study, these two studies, it was found that there is indeed a gender difference. There is a difference in the attitude or compassion, or the more tolerant attitude of the physicians with age, with experience, and so on. And if you see here, of course, this gender distribution doesn't tell us much. I have not made further detailed analysis yet, which I will be doing soon. This is pre-publication. So we found that 2/3 of the respondents were male and 1/3 were about female, roughly. And the overwhelming numbers were from specialities, very few generalists. That is a bit unfortunate, in my opinion. The more generalists we have, the better for patients, actually. And if you are, and it will also filter out the number of patients that a specialist has to see every day, so that you can probably spend more time with each patient. For example, you are burdened with 20 patients of common cold and one varicose vein in the midst of lumbosacral radiculopathy and multiple sclerosis. You would not be, giving more time to the more serious issues, and you will be drowned in the less serious conditions. And of course, the specialities, some of the studies have been interesting in that they found that there is a specialty difference in terms of how they expressed compassion towards the patient. I will show that to you also later. And years of practice, as you can see here, from about 250 responses, 64% have been more than 20 years in practice, and about the next largest number, about 17% are those more than 10 years. So overall, even if you look at the people who have taken the trouble of responding to the study, almost 80% of them have been seniors, They are the ones who probably were touched by this study, who have spent more than 10 years in the field, and they have responded. In fact, I sent this study to a large number of interns as well, who have just passed out, very junior doctors, duty doctors who are just 2 or 3 years into practice, and the response was very disappointing. Many of them didn't respond at all, and it is not surprising. If you go back to the previous study here, the UK study survey, they sent this survey to 1,300 plus doctors, and the response they got was only from 680. That is just about 50%. So only 50% of the doctors, even in an NHS funded study itself, they didn't respond to the survey. So as you can see here, it is reflected in our situation as well. Probably ours is more dismal. I sent out more than 700 forms and I received only about 250. So as I said, there are certain things which improve your outlook, and there are certain things which are barriers to medical compassion. So as a function of experience, which I told you, the more experienced you are, the more compassionate you become, probably the more kind you are. And that does not mean, I must hasten to add here, that youngsters are not kind or compassionate. Probably they become more mature with age. Probably it is also probable, more than likely, that they are more burdened with more paperwork, seeing more patients, filling discharge summaries, writing forms, and going to the lab and collecting reports, and so many things that they have to do will probably not leave much time for them. So we can't really blame youngsters for what these studies or surveys have found. Rather, we should encourage them. And here it was found in this particular survey that psychiatrists are probably more tolerant. They have less barriers to a compassionate behavior as compared to doctors in general medicine, that is internal medicine, and a few other specialties which are related to internal medicine or emergency medicine for that matter. So what did we find? I've not yet looked into specialty wise split up of the attitudes, but the very fact that the large number of respondents have been specialists shows that there is definitely an interest in this issue. So apart from this, what are the other barriers? Like I already told you, workload, then fatigue, repetitiveness. These are other barriers. So when the workload is high, you tend to spend less time per patient, and you get fatigued easily. And if you're keeping on seeing the same type of patients one after the other, when the work becomes repetitive, then also you tend to lose some degree of, I wouldn't say compassion, but you tend to lose some degree of sensitivity in this matter. So as you can see here in our survey, large number of these people have been saying only about the number of minutes that they spend per patient is between 6 to 20 minutes. It's not bad. In our situation, when you have a very heavy OP, to spend about 10 to 20 minutes per patient is very good. I would rather say it is generous. So that's a very heartening, very encouraging thing that I found here. And do you spend more time per patient at the beginning of your consultation rather than at the end of your consultation? Unsurprisingly, the answer is yes, because when you start, you're probably more fresh and probably more enthusiastic than at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, if you have a patient who comes with 3 years of vertigo, your aim would be to sort of dispose of the patient quickly and go home. So here again, as you can see here, about 2/3 of the patient have said yes, and I'm very happy with this response, in the sense because people have been honest to admit that they spend more time in the beginning than at the end. So they are more probably even subconsciously they are faster. Oh, time is up, so I have to finish. So that kind of thing. So it's not. I would not blame anybody for that. I would rather appreciate the honesty with which people have answered this. And how long do your patients spend in the waiting room? And again, people have been very forthright and honest. Many of them have answered more than 20 minutes. In our waiting rooms, of course, sometimes patients wait even for 1 or 2 hours. So 20 minutes is very good actually. And do you feel tired of seeing the same type of clinical cases every day? This is a function of repetitiveness. And again, happily, more than 70% of our doctors say no. That means they are not fatigued by repetitiveness. Only about 20 to 25, 29% of doctors say yes, they're tired of repetitiveness. Now, when they are tired of this repetitiveness, that's an early sign of fatigue, and fatigue in turn leads to burnout. And burnout leads to less compassion and more errors of judgment, as I showed you that downward spiral. So that can start. So when a person starts getting tired of this repetitiveness, then they should watch out. There are other manipulations, which I'll show you later, which people can easily do. And so that they have more time for themselves and put less stress on themselves. So the word compassion fatigue, which we saw earlier, it's a misnomer. The word compassion fatigue is wrong. The definition looks very nice. The profound emotional and physical exhaustion that helping professionals and caregivers develop over time due to repeated exposure to suffering during their work. So when they keep, for example, in the ICU, which is very intense, where you see intense suffering, or in the casualty where you see patients with head injury, traumas, fractures, and so on. And all these, and patients keep coming in one after the other, where there's no time even to breathe. So these are situations where you are emotionally and physically probably exhausted. But does it cause compassion fatigue? Studies have now shown that it does not. Actually, this, by saying compassion fatigue, we mean, or the term implies, that doctors have a finite reservoir of compassion, and over a period of time it gets depleted and dries up, and after say 5 years or 10 years, you're no longer compassionate, which means what? You're cruel? No, that is wrong. In fact, the studies have shown the opposite. Studies have shown that as you grow older, you become more mature, you are more experienced, you become more kind and more compassionate towards people. You become at least more tolerant, if not expressly compassionate, you become more tolerant towards others. So this is a misnomer. And it also seems to indicate that being compassionate is essentially tiring. So if you're compassionate, you become tired. So the word for compassion fatigue is a very wrong term. And unfortunately, it has been used in almost all the studies that have come in so far. And it probably tends to lead us in a wrong direction. Whereas actually, the findings show that when a person is compassionate, and most of the doctors in the surveys have shown that they are more happy, they feel more fulfilled and joyous when they are answering the questionnaires. This is what they have said. And they feel more satisfied with their work. And they feel that it is their calling. So this is it is time that the word compassion fatigue is dropped. However, we should not miss out on lack of compassion, because once they start developing physical fatigue or tired of repetitiveness, irritability, anger, resentment, that leads to lack of compassion, and that in turn is a vicarious indicator of burnout. So it should be recognized early. Once that is recognized and fixed, such doctors will not burn out at a younger age. In fact, burnouts are common in younger age, not in the older age. You will see more burnouts in probably 25 to 40 age rather than 45 to 60. And I have not seen a burnt out doctor above 60 in my life. In fact, most of the doctors that I've seen are above 60 are, role models. They are, in fact, sometimes I wonder from where they get their energy. They are so energetic. So what do we do beyond compassion fatigue? There are many other models. There are a few other models. That is called the transactional model, in which all the factors, the environment factors, the physician factors, the patient factors, everything is factored in to see what can be done. We will see that shortly. And there are other techniques like mindfulness. This is one example of a paper. And of course, other things which people can choose themselves, like recreations, hobbies, spiritual practices, meditation, all these things will definitely help. So based on this, as you can see, this is the transactional model, the physician factors, the clinical factors, the patient and family factors, and overall the environment factors. Environment factors means the institution where a person is working. That forms the environment for the work. So all this leads to expression of compassion or lack of compassion. Now, surprisingly, as I was saying earlier, the Chatushpada or the 4 pillars is mentioned in Charak Samhita. You know, if you look at this, it's very similar. The Bishak, who is the physician, the Rogi, that is the patient, the attenders or the Upasthata, and the Dravya or the treatment that you give, or the clinical aspects. All these things aspect upon the expression of feelings or compassion or kindness or even the outcomes. Charak actually deals with outcomes and indirectly with these. So when you look at the other methods of interventions or which self interventions which doctors practice, so these are the questions that we asked. Do you have any hobbies? Yes, that is very nice. Actually, in the survey, more than 90% of the doctors said yes, they have some hobbies or recreational activities, which is very good. And are you spiritual, religious, or atheistic? And it is about half, about 70% or 70% or so are either spiritual or religious, and very small percentage is atheistic, and about 10% are undecided. What I found, and this is one thing that I analyzed, and I find that the p-value for correlation between whether a person is spiritual or religious to expression of tolerance or compassion, there is no correlation. So happily, it does not make a difference. The p-value is about 0.36, which is insignificant. So whether a person is spiritual, expressly spiritual, or expressly belonging to a particular denomination, or even an atheist, it doesn't make any difference. If you want to be compassionate, if you want to express it, you can always do that. So that's a very good thing. That's a positive outcome. And irritability. So, the question for that, as you can see here, most of the people have said no. That is about 50% has said no, and about half of them have said yes, or sometimes. Now, sometimes can become always. So one has to, this is another pointer, or this is another red flag. So irritability outside practice, irritability in the, in the casualty or in the emergency room or in the theater, we see many surgeons flinging their instruments and doing things like that. But, that is the work pressure. It's not that they are trying to be cruel or anything of that sort. But irritability outside practice, in their own interpersonal relationships, when they express that, that is a sign of very early burnout and or fatigue. So that has to be addressed. And do you always look forward to the next day's practice? That is another very important question that was asked in our survey. And happily, more than 3/4 of the patients said yes, they do look forward. Only about 1/4, that is 22%, 1/5 rather, said they don't look forward to the next day's practice. So this is a sign of work engagement. Do you, are you very enthusiastic? Are you still enthusiastic about seeing patients? So that's very important. And these are the responses which we found, and this is what I found, by even the statistical analysis, the responses answer for themselves. Does being spiritual or religious affect the compassionate behavior? 50% said no, and say 50% said yes, and the rest of the 50% said either I don't know or no. So it was not really significant one way or the other. But again, about 90% of the people said they have hobbies, and about 80% of the people have said yes, having a hobby or a recreational activity or something to let out their pressure or tension actually is helpful in maintaining a calm attitude and compassionate behavior. So it does help. And this was an embedded question, and I would not go into that now. And which one of the and this was a very, very direct leading question. Which of the following would you choose? Being compassionate or being more evidence-based? And overwhelmingly, most of the doctors have said yes, they would like to be compassionate. We'll look into that, depending on the situations. And again, the next question: do you take decisions based on purely on evidence, or will also factor in your personal experience? And most of the people, in spite of scientific evidence being to the contrary, and 75% of the doctors have said yes, they will allow their personal experience to play a role in the decision making. It is good in terms of maintaining relationships. It may, I don't want to comment on that now until I have done a more thorough, correlative analysis of that. But I'm just showing you the initial data. And these two are very interesting. If a patient comes to your consulting room late, after you have finished consulting, you're about to leave, will you entertain the patient or give a fresh appointment? And I was happy to see this. 75% of our doctors have said, yes, I will see the patient. That's nice. It is a sign of tolerance. As you can see here, one of the components of compassion is tolerance. And most of the people have said yes. And another thing, about the payment. After you finished consultation, a patient informs you that he does not have sufficient money. What will you do? Will you waive the fees? Will you provide a discount or tell him to pay during the next visit? So about, as you can see, 2/3 of the doctors have said, okay, I will waive off the fees or I'll give a discount. And only a small percentage of doctors have said that they will ask them to pay during the next visit, which I feel is not bad. It is, in life, you also have to be practical. Like Dr. Ravi was saying, you can't be too compassionate also. You have to be practical at certain points. So this is not negative. So this is another important thing, as this is an eye opener actually. How does being compassionate help? This is the direct question to the doctors, and this was this was a question where one could choose multiple responses, not just one. And as you can see, more than 75%, 191 responses for all of the above, and the above includes improving patient confidence, avoids miscommunication, improves patient relatives' morals, and improves outcomes. So all this, most of our doctors believe that being compassionate improves everything. And there were only 2 people who said none of the above. And there's another real eye-opener. Since compassion and empathy are not curricular, which of the following helped you to develop such an attitude towards patients? Was it a role model? Was it culture and tradition? Was it your innate nature? Or was it a personal experience? And as you can see, personal experience was the top of the chart. That is, large number of doctors have had some personal experience in their lives, which might have been medical, for themselves or for some close relative, which made them compassionate, and also their innate nature, which comes second. And as you can see, this other original study, are doctors who have been ill more compassionate? And they found that doctors who have suffered or gone through some major illness or even minor illness tend to be more receptive and compassionate towards patients. So these are some of the narratives of the doctors themselves. You see, I have seen physicians, and they basically say, I don't want to read each and every one of them. They say that having experienced the process, they feel that they are now gentler towards the patients. And this is another very important question. Would you be able to maintain a compassionate outlook towards patients irrespective of patient attitude? We'll come to that in a minute. And a large number of our doctors have said, yes, they will be able to maintain. It is a very difficult thing to do. When you have a hostile patient or a hostile relatives surrounding you, being very calm and compassionate is very difficult. It's a non-judgmental attitude, which is again a component of compassion. A large number of doctors have said, yes, that's nice. Does compassion have a placebo effect on treatment? Which is a summary of the previous slide, which showed that. And an overwhelming number of doctors have said, yes, this is a positive psychology. It does help in outcomes. So overall, from the survey, I would say that yes, our doctors are compassionate. They try to express compassion in their daily life to the largest extent possible, although there are a lot of barriers to it. It's a positive sign. So people like you, who are running Umang, I know when you described Umang in the initial part, when I was listening to that, I felt that most of your stated objectives are, match perfectly with what is required when we see this these data. So what are the targets for producing a positive influence? It can be physician factors, patient factors, family or caregiver factors, and environment factors. So when you look at physician factors, as I said, age, increasing age, gender, there are some surveys which have shown that women tend to be more compassionate or more receptive to their patients, years of experience and seniority. But more important than that are the intrinsic factors. That is a sense of calling. You feel that it is your duty, that you're sort of made for it or born for it. Work engagement and absorption, self-image and compassion. You have to be confident, self-confident. And more important than anything, you should be compassionate to yourself before you are compassionate to others. Positive psychology, application of mindfulness and other spiritual practices, and a sense of gratitude. So these are things, these are easy to do, which are probably, these interventions can be done when you see warning signals of, like irritability, or when a person says he's seeing the same type of cases, or repetitiveness, or tending to stay away from teams, especially in the ER or ICU, when you have to work in teams, when a person is not going with the team. These are sort of red flags, and these things will help you to sort of integrate and make their life easier. And patient and family, the type of patient, obviously it is very easy to be compassionate to a patient who is gentle and very grateful to you, who doesn't mind waiting in the waiting room and allowing another patient to go in front of him, although he may have come earlier. Whereas when a person comes to you and starts complaining, saying, doctor, ये दवाई काम ही नहीं कर रहा है, इसका कोई फायदा ही नहीं हुआ, मैं 4 महीने से कर रहा हूँ, 1 साल से कर रहा हूँ इसको, when you see a patient like that, you tend to get irritated, because doctors are also human beings, and it is not unnatural for you to get a bit irritated with that. So the type of patient definitely affects how you behave. Diseases for which the patient is presented, obviously it is easier for doctors to be compassionate, say for example, to 12-year-old boy who has been brought with ALL, rather than 35-year-old woman who has come with a lot of somatic complaints and who comes repeatedly complaining, saying that one day she says backache, the other day she says neck pain, the third day she's saying chakkar. And when you investigate, everything is normal. You rather want to finish off, and get to the more important, when in our opinion, the other person is important. But for that person, her complaints are real. So one cannot say that, you can't dismiss them. You have to be sort of practical in that approach. Unrealistic expectations, patient will come and say that having taken 1 day of treatment, he'll come and say that his backache is not gone. Or a person with somatic symptoms keep coming and telling you that the headache is not gone, they're not able to sleep, and so on. So unrealistic expectations without compliance, especially without compliance. If they're not compliant, not doing what you're telling them to do, obviously you're not going to express the same kind of attitude towards them, or hostility in the part of relatives. So in the face of all this, for us to be calm, we have to maintain a certain level of detachment. So the thing is, one should not invest too much emotion into the patient, and see each one of them separately. And feeling of deservedness. Now, this is a thing which creeps in, which is very unavoidable. For example, you see an alcoholic with cirrhosis, and you see a patient who has HbA, who is HbA/Cg positive and has gone on to develop cirrhosis. Obviously, one might feel, this fellow has been drinking, so what can be done? He may deserve it. So that kind of deservedness should not be there in our approach. So we should detach our emotions from the treatment. So at least you might be tolerant towards this patient, although you may not overly express compassion, that you can, if you are at a different level. I feel, I am also human, and I have seen all this. So that's what I'm saying. And the work environment, it is easier to, when you are in your own clinic, you are the boss, you can take your time, nobody's going to say anything. But when you're in a corporate or a teaching institution, there's always pressure to complete your targets, factors competing for attention. There might be a patient sitting there, and there might be a call from a colleague to see an urgent inpatient. There might be a call from the dean's office to attend an urgent meeting, or paperwork, teaching, administration, repeated interruptions. And on top of that, pressure to discharge patients so that beds are made free for new patients to come in, and a litigious atmosphere. All these things can be easily looked into, and you can apportion your work and time to see that these things do not impinge on our attitude. So to summarize, the daily habits then enhance doctors' well-being and also patients are kindness, appreciation, gratitude, mindfulness, compassion, the joy of service. And the scientific evidence also shows that, and this is reflected in the survey, even doctors feel that it is safer, it is more effective, it achieves better outcomes, it saves time, it reduces demand and gives back meaning to work and also costs less. So in summary, compassionate caring saves time. It also achieves better outcomes and is not just for patients, it's for everybody. And, like this is an old saying, difference in mortality rates between optimist and pessimist is similar to smokers and non-smokers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ravi, are you there?
I think this was an excellent overview of how earlier physicians used to behave. They did all this without having somebody like Dr. Devanathan telling them this. But I think today's generation needs this to be told to them, especially when it comes in the form of an evidence of a study. I think it does make difference.
Thank you.
Alpa, if there are no questions, can I add one or 2 points to what he has said?
Sure, sir. Sure, you can ask.
Yeah. I've had a long beginning of 50 years practicing as an orthopedic surgeon, especially treating pains, etc. And I think the compassion fatigue that we're talking about, though the term coined perhaps is slightly inappropriate, but the whole thing has a large influence of extracurricular factors or extra practice factors. And that is, I would even go to the extent that curricular factors like institutional demands, students' demands, patients' demands would probably form 30-40%, but about more than 50% factors extraneous in our other part of the life, which is non-medical part of the life, does influence. I've seen lots of my students, lots of my colleagues being influenced by these factors, and they develop compassion fatigue. They become irritable, etc. Another thing is, even those who are really very, very good, very sane, very level-headed, they develop compassion fatigue. So it's not necessarily that something has to happen to them to go through that. I think it's just a period of time. I've also seen that this compassion fatigue are often vexing and waning. There have been times in my own life where at the age of around 50, I felt, oh, no more medicine. Let's get out of here. And in a year's time, I felt so enthusiastic about practice. I said, what the hell I was thinking last year? And this I've seen happening to lots of people. So this compassion fatigue also is not a one-time phenomena that once it occurs, it's always down. You do go up and down on those series. One point I would like to make out about is we talk about stresses, the medical stresses, the curricular stresses, I would call them, or extracurricular stresses. Your family difficulties, somebody's illnesses, your financial difficulties, whatever you call them. As a medico, most of us, I would say 90% of us, barring few specialties, do get stressed in the performance of our own duty, daily duty. And we get stressed every day. Some days less, some days more. Over a period of time, we overtly don't appreciate that stress, but it's there. And we always have a tendency that, this weekend, last 8 days of December, I'm going to go to Switzerland to de-stress myself. Or maybe in the month of June, I'll go for a diving trip, I'll go for a photography trip, and so on and so forth. If we get stressed every day, we deserve to have de-stressor every day. And that is where having something else in your life, like any modern arts or any hobbies, is a must. And the hobby must be such that when you're pursuing that, for example, if I'm singing or if I'm teaching music, during that time, I should forget that I have a serious patient in ICU for those 20 minutes. If I truly forget that for 20 minutes, that look here, I have a serious patient in ICU, probably I have de-stressed myself. It's not that I want to neglect that patient. It's not that I don't want to hear about it. But if I naturally forget about it for those minutes, I have truly de-stressed myself. And I think every physician who's going to be exposed to the stress must have a de-stress dose on a daily basis rather than sporadically or mal-periodically, I would say. And that's very important.
Sorry, I lost the connection between. Any questions?
May I just respond?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we can
that
take
was,
one or two questions.
No, no, responding to Dr. Ingalkar.
Yeah, sorry. I missed it.
Yeah. I can't agree more with you. I mean, it is absolutely on the spot, on the dot. You know, the importance of having some activity. It may be a recreation, like you said, music or arts or painting or even just reading something else. You may be reading some novel or you may, whatever it is, or practicing other things like yoga or meditation. The importance of de-stressing yourself should be definitely, I fully agree. It should be on a daily basis. It can't be periodic. I mean, you can't have stress 365 days a year and you say sort of de-stress yourself 6 days in a year. That is not going to work because it doesn't work biologically. It will not work psychologically either. So as you rightly said, if you do that, you're not neglecting your patient. Obviously, you're getting in better shape to deal with the same patient in a better manner the next day. So, there is absolutely no question of feeling guilty or, as if you're neglecting that patient at all about it. In fact, as I said, self-compassion. So this forms part of self-compassion and esteem. So if you have that, you are well protected against fatigue of any sort, not only compassion fatigue, even physical fatigue or work fatigue, whatever fatigue you might call it, you are well protected.
Okay.
Sometimes when you're working in OPD, you do come across a nasty patient who's really irritating, really irritating, talking a lot of nonsense, disregarding, disrespectfully. So my resident around me keep looking at me. Why are you tolerating this, sir? I can read it in their eyes. So I tell them, I want you to learn to enjoy these funny things. अरे क्या मजा आया, वो कैसे गुस्सा हो गया था ना, इतना funnily different than last week's patient, no? How funny is that? And they really learn to enjoy that. Their irritability with the patient over a period of time goes down. I said, enjoy clinical medicine, enjoy human beings who are coming, sitting next to you.
True.
Okay.
I had one comment.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
Alpa.
Yeah, so it was a very, very nice talk, sir. So what I feel that basically, I mean, when you talk of compassion, it may start like a training but ultimately this has to become your state from within. And once that becomes your state, you don't have to put in any extra efforts for doing it. And that's where, you'll probably never experience compassion fatigue.
Yes.
And in the very first beginning, when you said the definition that it is to go beyond just feeling bad and trying to alleviate things. So at times it's not, you maybe not nicely talking to the patient. Sometimes you have to fire a patient because they are going wrong, but you are not disturbed from inside. And with the process of helping them to change their behavior, you sometimes go out of the way to fire them. So it's not necessarily just using nice or kind words, but ultimately using different ways to somehow to help the patient to get better and overcome their issues. So all those components are also very important. And unless I feel that we ourselves start growing like a person, we mature, and we ourselves become spiritual, not religious, but spiritual ourselves, then it becomes a constant state. And then it comes out naturally, the patient. You don't have to make efforts.
True. Absolutely.
Thank you, Alpa, for
Yeah.
those additions. So on behalf of Team Umang, I thank Dr. Vasudevan sir for peeping us through and giving us deep insight into compassion care. As they say, Santa always brings everyone smile, happiness, calmness, enthusiasm, love and compassion. And Dr. Vasudevan has come as Santa for us, enlightening us about his thoughts on
No
compassion,
beard.
which is an integral part of our profession. Love and compassion with kindness are anchors of life. We need to have some take-home messages. And we know that love and compassion with kindness are anchors of life. They are the necessities of life and not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. And doctors are supposed to be great, compassionate human beings. Our profession demands it. But we are not Santa. We are ultimately human beings and have and should have limitations. Everyone cannot be expected to become a Santa or Buddha. Compassion is to look beyond your own pain to see the pain of others. But beware of compassion fate. Anything excess is poison, they say. I want to quote one Hindi song here. I will sing a few words of this, few lines. जीने को तो जीते हैं सभी, प्यार बिना कैसी जिंदगी, आओ मिलजुल के सुख दुख बांटे, क्यों हम रहे अजनबी, हम सफर है सभी. So friends, take care of each other, be compassionate, loving and caring. Be an asset to yourself, but don't get carried away. Take care of yourself. That is the final message. With that note, on behalf of Team Umang, a special thanks to dear Vasudevan sir, and thank you all dear friends for sparing your valuable time on a Christmas holiday and a holiday as well. You can reach out to us on empowerdocs2020@gmail.com. You can watch recordings of all our sessions on Facebook page Umang Empowering Medicos and on YouTube at Empowering Medicos-Umang. Wish you all again a Merry Christmas and a very happy, lovely and compassionate New Year 2022. May
Thank
God
you.
bless us all. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you,
Gauri.
Lina.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Alpa.
Ravi.
Thank you, Dr. Devanathan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.